On today's Transport Evolved, Tesla rents more land, Nissan seriously considers bigger battery packs, and a naked guy does the Tesla dance on the PCH in the rush hour. These stories and more coming up next on Transport Evolved. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to episode number 197 of Transport Evolved, recorded on Friday, April 25th, 2014. My name is Nikki Gordon-Bloomfield.
And I'm Mark Chatterley. How are you today, Nikki?
I'm better than you, my love. How are you?
I've been conserving my energy all afternoon for this show. That's what I've been doing today.
I know, and I'm very grateful that you've been doing that. I watched your thoughts of the day earlier on today, and I did say, ill Mark looks like stoned Mark, so please get better soon.
Yeah, I should point out, not stoned, just
not stoned.
Have an infection.
Not that I know what stoned Mark looks like, because I bet you're a good boy and you've never had that, experience before, but...
I've never experienced any drugs that weren't prescribed to me.
There you go. We should probably move on. Terrible introduction. So joining us on the show today is a gentleman who's been on the show before several times. He has just informed us that he has been driving a Nissan vehicle that we haven't yet driven. So we're both incredibly jealous. Please welcome to the show, Martin Messer-Thomsen. How are you today, Martin?
I'm very fine, thank you.
So you've just been driving the NV200, the ENV200. Tell us about that quickly.
Well, it was in Hanover at the very industrial fair 2 weeks ago. There was a small drive just around on a square in front of the show where you had the opportunity to do a few rounds in the very interesting van. I believe it's the first real production van, so that was very exciting. And a lot of people here in Denmark are looking very, very much forward to this car coming out.
Now tell me, the ENV200, it sort of drives, I've heard lots of good things about it. I haven't driven it myself. I was actually talking to some Nissan reps yesterday and they were going, yeah, it's a really nice vehicle. Did you drive all of the variants? Because there's going to be three variants, isn't there? There's the Evalia version, which is kind of like the family car variant. Then there's the commercial panel van, and then there's what they call a crew cab variant with like 2 rows of seats, but then it's got a van back end to it. So tell us about that.
That was the family version with just 1 row of seat in the back. So it wasn't the van feeling, it was more like a normal car feeling.
Right.
And there's a bit of changes in the cabin. The gear lever is different from the normal leaf, which is more van-like, more normal gear shifter-like. So that is very nice. But the handling and the driving was very, very much like the new Leaf.
Lovely.
From what I could tell, not going more than 50 kilometers an hour, but it was very nice. I'm sure this, depending on the price, of course, but this is going to be very, very exciting news later this year.
It's going to be fun because I know that the press launches are coming up in about a month and a half, Mark, because you're off on that one, aren't you?
I am, yes. About a month and a half, about 6 weeks from now.
Right. It's just as I'm coming back from the wave, I know. You're going to go off and drive them and tell us what they're like. So it's going to be interesting.
Very excited.
All right, so let's move on with the show. Did you all have a good break over the Easter weekend, Mark and Martin?
I did. I've eaten all my Easter eggs though, so I'm a bit sad about that.
You haven't. How many did you have?
I only had 2.
Okay, so I had 3, and I've only eaten 1 so far. So yeah.
One of them's definitely mine. I'm sure that's
well,
rules.
One of them was little cream eggs, so kind of they don't really count. But no, I've still got lots. I'm going to be the last person in my family to do them. But you went on long distance trips, didn't you, Mark? You went to Cardiff. Not really a long distance, I suppose.
No, it's about 65, 70 miles from where I live. Nice and easy to do in my car. Got there, didn't use any rapid chargers because I don't have to, although they are on the route now in case it gets rainy or stormy. But I mean, I made the decision on Sunday when I was meant to be coming back. It was very, very rainy, stormy, haily. And I just made the decision to stay next day because that's far more sensible to me than risking my life on the motorway when it's raining.
That is very true. It's very interesting that corridor of the motorway. My wife now travels that same route every day, and she just came home. She got home early today in the Leaf, and I said, "Didn't you stop to rapid charge?" "Oh no, I didn't need to." Got home with 4 miles range or 8 miles range or whatever. She's getting a pro. So, Martin, did you go anywhere special in an EV?
We rented a summer house in the southern part of Denmark, and of course took the new Leaf there. And we were 5 people and fully loaded Leaf, and it went fantastic, doing more than 750 kilometers in 6 days.
Wow, that makes me feel so guilty because I drove all the way to Norwich and back, which is about 400, 500 mile round trip, and I did that in the Volt in 1 day. But there is a I suppose it's more than just anecdotal because coming back, we spied the Tesla supercharging stations going in at South Mims. I think we can safely say they're Tesla superchargers, right, Mark? I don't see what else they could be.
Yeah, because the only other option could be the new triple heads, but they don't look big enough. They're definitely not tall enough for the triple heads. And
right.
It's that kind of sleek, narrow form that does remind me instantly of the US superchargers, although not as tall as the US ones. It's kind of got the width, but not the height.
Right. And that's probably the best way of putting it, I guess. It was. Yeah. I wish I could show you the photo, but I just realised I have a new laptop and I haven't set it up in the lower thirds. So I will set it up by later on in the show. But do we think superchargers, we're now going to see superchargers coming out all over the UK? Because Tesla hasn't even launched in the UK officially. It's not started deliveries yet, has it, of the Model S?
No, which is, I believe, slightly behind schedule, isn't it? I'm sure
No, it was May, I think.
Okay, in my head I had April. But it's good that they're rolling out, and I hope, because these were located where existing rapid chargers were, if that follows suit, then we may see more superchargers going in than anyone ever thought. The sort of prevailing rumour until now has been kind of there's going to be one in London and one in Manchester or Birmingham, and that's going to be about it. But this wasn't really in London, and it kind of hints that there may be more in the UK than we previously thought there would be.
Well, Malcolm, Martin, where would you like to see them?
Well, it's a bit strange if they put up superchargers in England now, because the cars has been on sale in many other places in Europe where we don't have any superchargers yet. So that would be a bit odd to me, but forming a more consistent corridor through Europe would be the first start for me, I think. Because there are so many in Norway now, and they are obviously in Germany, Holland, and Switzerland and Austria, but there is no one in the middle, so you can't really drive and combine these two areas. So that would be my first choice if I was in charge.
So what you see here is you've got a photograph of the two charging stations in question. Mark, it's the location of this second one that makes me think supercharger, because it's not in front of the stall like the previous charging stations have been. It's on the side, and it's just on the side where the Tesla fuel port would be if you parked your Tesla that way round.
Yes. So it seems to be set up for the Tesla. Although they're saying that other cars do have, I think the i3's charging port is there as well. So it's not 100% conclusive. It just seems to be sort of 95%. Yeah. We'll see. Sorry, I was expecting, but I didn't hear the end of the sentence there. Sorry, so it was kind of like you expected me to go on for longer. Yes, sorry, that was me going. Huh? I didn't expect that. Anyway, good. It would be good to see. And we saw a Belgian Model S there at that site coming back. I didn't say hello to the driver, so if you were there in a Belgian Model S on Saturday last week, hello. We were the people in the Volt.
But we didn't say hello because we didn't see anybody there. Anyway, on to the second story. What's the average EV driver like? We've talked about average EV drivers before, and we've come up with this concept that I think there is no such thing as an average, is there? There's no such thing as an average anything. So there's no such thing as an average EV driver. But there was a really interesting study that came out this week by Experian, which says that electric car buyers tend to be, on average, younger and more affluent than hybrid car buyers. Now, Experian are a credit agency, effectively. They do credit reports or whatever. So their report was not exactly the most balanced I've seen, and there seems to be some statistical holes in this. But what do we think of this? I mean, we can go through some of the things. 44% of electric car buyers had at least one child between the ages of 0 and 18 years of age. The majority of people who were buying hybrids, 45%, tended to be 56 years old or over. But the majority of electric car buyers, 55%, were between the ages of 35 and 55 years of age. What do we think of this, Mark? What do you think?
Yeah, it kind of makes some logical sense in the way that you have to make, the problem with this is you have to make very sweeping generalizations. So sweepingly, the older generation doesn't tend to like trying new technology as much. And I've heard it from my family and other people's families is, you're driving an untested technology. You don't know what's going to happen in 2 years' time, which isn't necessarily true, but that's their view on it. And so I can totally see why they would then choose a hybrid over an electric car, because they've still got that same urge to reduce their emissions and to save fuel. But maybe we're still at the point where there aren't enough EV drivers to get any single profile. Like you say, we've tried to sort of intuit a type of person, and the only link between the various people who have EVs that I know is an interest in renewable energy. Seems to be the most common theme that I've seen, whether that's someone who's just interested in it like me because I can't put any around me, or people who've covered their houses in solar panels and solar heating and heat pumps. That seems to be the uniting factors for me. But that would mean that you'd have to be generally older to have the money to do that. So that goes against this study. So I don't know, it's very interesting, I think. I think maybe we just need more time.
What do you think, Martin?
Well, if it's statistically all right, this survey, I think it's quite interesting if it's the younger segment that are buying the EVs. I wasn't really surprised, because what I see from where I stand, that many people with smaller kids are very interested in this for some reason. That seems to be more attractive. Maybe because of the green way of living. I don't know. That's more important maybe when you have kids.
I think so. I think when you have children, you want to have something left to give them. You want to have a legacy to give your children. You don't want to kind of squander the resources that you have available to you. And it's not like you're going to die and not pass it on to anybody. You're gonna say to your kids, on your deathbed, "Oh, I'm sorry, I drove a Humvee." But the electric cars are good now. You should drive. So as a parent, you try and do something that is responsible. You try and live by example. Doesn't always work, but I think that's what parents generally try and do. I think one of the caveats to this all, though, is this statistic that says that the EV buyers are more affluent than hybrid car buyers. The price of electric vehicles is far higher than the average price of hybrids. So therefore, you are going to get a discrepancy in the statistics, because people who are in a lower income bracket may not be able to afford an EV, whereas those in a lower income bracket are going to buy a hybrid, and there are far more people buying hybrids than there are buying electrics. So the mean will be affected, won't it, Mark? Can you help me explain this? So that the sample size is different for each class, right?
Yeah, so if the sample size is different, then the margin for error on what the data you're collecting will be higher in the smaller sample size, because you literally don't have as much information. And the fact that we can't compare product like for like means you either have to do some weird statistical twists and turns to try and equalize that playing field, or you just have to accept that as a skew on your data, which I think they've gone for here. So the understanding that electric cars cost more, therefore they are likely to be bought by people with higher incomes.
Yeah.
It's just going to be a natural conclusion.
Yeah.
And again, there's not much you can do to equal that out until there are more EVs on the roads and their pricing changes. But it's all, I mean, this, I suppose, at the moment is trying to predict a new market rather than look into an established one. So it's a slightly different way of doing it.
Yeah, I suppose it's going to be more interesting when we have more EVs and the statistics are nearer to each other. Maybe we need a statistician to ring us.
Yes.
Maybe we need someone who is a statistician. And I dated someone for a while who was in statistics. And maybe I should contact them and go, would you mind helping us out with a little bit of understanding of the statistics? If you are a statistical mathematician by profession, you'd like to explain to us how this survey can be skewed, get in touch, because I'd like to really understand this data better. Over in California, Toyota is starting to worry a little bit. You see, it's been producing the RAV4 EV. It is unashamedly a compliance car, which is such a shame because we'd like it here in the UK, wouldn't we, Mark?
The number of RAV4s you see going round and people who swear by them as a car. I've had a number of conversations with RAV4 drivers who go, I'd never buy another car. It'd be another RAV4. And it's just like, we could bring the EV over here. It'd be great.
And I'm guessing it would be quite popular in Denmark as well.
Absolutely, that could be interesting because there are not very many large SUVs, or this is a smaller SUV, but there are not many SUV electric yet. So that would be very interesting. Yeah, absolutely.
But even in the States, it's difficult. I mean, I know people in Oregon and New York who would love a RAV4 EV and they can't even get one. And you know, Oregon and New York and Washington State are normally clumped with California in the compliance car states. They have better choice. But in this case, you know, it has to be California and it has to be certain markets in California. As a consequence, Toyota's not yet hit its quota of 2,600 RAV4 EVs that it needs to hit by sometime next year in order to satisfy the California zero emission mandate from the Air Resources Board. As a consequence, Toyota's going, okay, we need to sell more of these. So what are we going to do? I know, we'll put money down on the hood, which for Europeans is kind of an unusual concept, right, Mark? We don't do that here.
No, I mean, we have one-off sales and special finance agreements, but it's never just we're reducing the cost of the car by this much. That I've never seen that. Or maybe I don't travel in the right world to see that. Maybe I should. Well,
I mean, we tend to have deals, but they're not done in the same way. So we'll be told, oh, the car's dropped in price or whatever. But for Toyota, they're putting down $14,500 on the hood in the form of lease incentives to anybody who wants to buy a Toyota RAV4 EV, or rather lease a Toyota RAV4 EV. And it's really complicated how the breakdown works because some of the money goes towards money off your first month's lease. Some of it offsets the tax that you have to pay. Some of it offsets the registration and the licensing fees. So someone, again, this is all maths. And, I did fairly well in maths at high school, but I wouldn't say I was a advanced mathematician. But it's all clever accounting. This costs you less because of this. This costs you less because of that. Oh, we're giving you £2,000 off because it's blue. I don't know. But the net effect is that the cost of a RAV4 EV, if you're leasing in California, has really dropped. And it's only because Toyota needs to sell them. Now, we've talked about this. You actually thought of the day today, Mark, revolved around this. The idea that this car is overpriced normally. I mean, it's around the $50,000 mark. And that's kind of into Tesla territory, which we think is part of the reason why it's not sold very many.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say overpriced, maybe because I'm not in that segment, so I don't really know what kind of things people want. But the money that they're asking for it does give you pause for thought because it is the bottom of the Tesla Model S territory. So I don't know. The lowest level Model S is a very different car to the highest Model S. It doesn't have supercharging and so on. So it is a different car altogether. And one thing I would love to try is see what a base Model S is like. But it puts people purchasing those cars into a very interesting situation of for just a little bit more, or even for the same amount of money, we could have this other car, which is by many standards better for certain things.
Well, okay, we should probably give a bit of a rundown of the Toyota RAV4 EV in case anybody doesn't know about it. It's essentially, as we say, it was a compliance car. It was built by Toyota under duress, I think is probably the best way of putting it. Toyota really doesn't believe in electric vehicles anyway, anyhow. It really wants hydrogen and hybrids. It doesn't like electrics. It's been very vocal about that in the past. But as a consequence, instead of doing it in-house, it went to Tesla and said, hello, we'd like you to build us a drivetrain and a battery pack to put in these compliance cars, which Tesla did. Very, very astute move for Elon Musk, because it meant he got extra money for Tesla Motors at a time when Tesla really did need that extra cash. And so it's a Tesla engineered vehicle. I've not driven one, but I've spoken to several people who have, who are very complimentary about the torque. Well over 100 miles achievable real world range. The only downside is the charging. Now, this car has got the same 10 kilowatt onboard charger as the Model S, as that the Model S in the States comes with a standard. I know the European version is slightly different. But you can charge at 10 kilowatts from a J1772 charging station, as long as that charging station can provide those 10 kilowatts. There's no rapid charge capabilities. And of course, despite being a Tesla, it doesn't have supercharge capabilities. But there are some very clever people doing CHAdeMO modifications to get CHAdeMO quick charging.
So it is very much like a base Model S in that sense. No supercharging, only a 10 kilowatt onboard charger. It sounds like a base Model S in a different package.
Yeah, but it's a family SUV.
With a slower 0-60.
But not capable of driving long distance or semi-long distance like the Leaf or any of the other cars.
No.
So that could be one of the issues why it's not selling so well.
Yeah, and you have to remember, California's very long.
Yes.
And people regularly travel from north to south, whether it's for work or for holiday or the weekend. It's a common thing to do. And that's why the Tesla Model S is so popular, because it's just, you can just zip up the freeway quite happy, up the 101. All right, so let's move on. Finally, for this segment, Tesla has just obtained a permit to modify a building it's leasing in the Central California Valley, which used to be used by the Daimler Chrysler partnership for a distribution center. The permits are to modify the building, and Tesla has put up on its website a load of job listings for CNC staff. So this is not anything to do with the Gigafactory, as far as we can tell. Obviously, it's not the Gigafactory itself, because the site is tiny. It's tiny in comparison to what Tesla has in Fremont, and the Fremont factory is not even full yet, where the Model S is made. So this seems to be a parts manufacturing or similar. Do we all concur this is probably parts of the Model X?
Could be some of the superchargers, maybe.
Yes, that's true.
It could be other components that we don't know of yet, but of course it could be parts of the Model X. Absolutely.
Someone in the chat room, by the way, has just said, with regard to our last story, if the Toyota RAV4 had direct current fast charging, it would sell. And they suspect that Tesla knows that. Not Tesla, Toyota knows that, and therefore it hasn't got it. Mark, what do you think about this factory in Central, in Lathrop, I think it is?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, we all know Tesla needs to expand. Tesla, as a company, is at a point where it can't remain still. Its current output, it needs to grow to become a bigger business. And in fact, I think if it stayed where it was, it would stall. So it makes sense that they're acquiring land and redoing land. So yeah, it could be parts manufacturing. It could be the very forward thinking for the Model E, in the sense that they're going to need a production line, because they're still going to be making Model S's and Model X's when the Model E comes out, and it's going to have a whole different platform, as in a smaller, stubbier platform that it's on. So it's going to have a whole different manufacturing line. So maybe it's just, let's buy this building now, it's come up, it's the right size, and we'll use it for whatever we can at the moment, because in 2 years' time, it's going to be churning out 1,000 cars a week.
That's a possibility. The other thing I think we should probably mention is, do people know what CNC is? I mean, I suppose I assume most people do. Maybe that's a bit presumptuous of me. CNC is computer numerical control. It's essentially computer aided machining, right? Is the best way of describing it.
Yeah.
So it's things like it's parts that can be reproduced again and again and again and again by computers rather than people. It's industrial production. It's not like prototyping or anything like that. This is, well, it could be prototyping, but it's probably, with the amount of jobs that they've got there, it's probably going to be something a bit more mainstream. Right, it's ad break time. If you haven't watched this show before, we normally have a break about now. If you're watching live, listening live, there isn't a break. If you're listening to the podcast, there isn't a break. But YouTube, you will watch an ad now. Please do watch it. Don't skip it, because it will help us just by giving some of your time to watch an ad. We'll be right back. We're back, part 2. We have got a really good story, couple of really good stories in this segment. One that made me crack up so many times today when I was doing 10. I couldn't. It took me about 20 times to get this through. But the first story in this segment, Tesla has found a friend in the FTC, which is phenomenal news. Now, this is regarding the Tesla v Auto Dealer Associations. It's been going on for such a long time. Auto Dealer Associations, very, very powerful in the US. They have been lobbying through PACs. They have been lobbying through special interest groups. They have been lobbying through contacts with various members of Congress, maybe various members of the federal government, both nationally and at a local and statewide level. And the result is that, you've seen instances, for example, in New Jersey, where Tesla has been banned from selling its cars directly to consumers. You've also seen the flip side. Washington State recently passed a bill that enabled Tesla to open more stores. Arizona and Texas, 2 other places where Tesla's not allowed. And there are numerous states where it's kind of a grey area. Tesla's allowed to sell, but it only has to sell a certain number of cars, or it has to have a special, satisfy special needs. But the FTC has basically said banning Tesla's business model is anti-competitive. I'm paraphrasing, but Mark, is that what you got from this?
I have to admit, I'm slightly behind on this story, so I haven't read it all in depth. But yes, so the idea that I think it comes down to a understanding, or a different understanding, of what the free market is in America. So the current laws that have passed were passed to allow everyone to have a chance to sell cars. So it wasn't going to be dominated by these massive companies, which worked back in the day. But now, where the dealerships are owned by massive companies anyway, you could argue that those laws have been subverted by big business. And so the view here is that, well, it's not protecting the small mum and pop store anymore.
Yeah, it's not.
What's actually happening is it's stopping Tesla doing what they're trying to do, and that's not the free market then. So it's a weird, convoluted story, but I'm not hugely au fait with US politics.
Or the Federal Trade Commission.
Exactly.
Okay, so I will read you what they said. This was on the Federal Trade Commission website, the Competition Matters blog. The agency that supports Tesla's direct sales approach, likening it to past technological advances in consumer business relations. In this case and others, many state and local regulators have eliminated the direct purchasing option for consumers by taking steps to protect existing middlemen from new competition. We believe this is bad policy for a number of reasons. Dealers contend that it is important for the regulators to prevent abuses of local dealers. This rationale appears unsupported, however, with respect to blanket prohibitions of direct sales by manufacturers. And in any event, it has no relevance to companies like Tesla. It never had any independent dealers and reportedly does not want them. This is officially from the FTC. And so this is not kind of, the FTC is necessarily going to help Tesla fight any fights, but it's a cautionary note to any auto dealer associations who decide they want to take things to a federal level.
Yeah, they've drawn a line in the sand.
Right. And it's just, it is a bit like, because it will eventually, I have no doubt that this case will eventually go to the Supreme Court. And based on the judges that are currently in the Supreme Court, I suspect it will be voted on in Tesla's favour. When that will happen or how it will happen, I'm not sure. But this was kind of a warning. If you expect us to protect you, to help you, auto dealer associations, actually, you're the ones being anti-competitive. Martin, what do you think of this all?
Well, it's a fantastic story, and it keeps on going and get more and more complicated from us viewing from Europe. But the bottom line is, I think this is in favor of Tesla, because some of my friends are just following this story, and they don't know anything about electric cars or anything about it. But it's just such an amazing story, getting a lot of coverage in Europe and in Denmark also.
Yeah.
So I think in the long run, Tesla will benefit from this, absolutely.
And I think in some ways here in Europe, we're watching this all with interest, because our European Union, if you ignore some of the factions in the UK, and I suspect in other countries that want all of the European Union countries to split apart and no longer work together, we are essentially a protozoic European Union of countries that form in a similar way to the US. We have little individual areas that have their own laws and policies, like the individual states. And we have supposedly an overarching policy that is supposed to try and govern things across the whole of Europe. Now, I'm not going to get into any arguments about whether that works or not. The difference is that obviously in Europe, we all speak different languages, whereas in the States, they're all mostly speaking the same language. So I think we look at the US and the politics going on in the US and go, that could be us. Yeah. Having similar arguments about, I don't think any European country would necessarily try and stop Tesla from selling in this particular way, though, Martin, do you? Apart from maybe France. Be interested to know how France, because obviously France is very unionistic, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the only country I can think of that would potentially even consider that. What do you think, Mark? Do you think any countries in Europe would? No, he's miles away.
No, sorry. I was trying to get a recording of the sound that's coming to my ears so I can diagnose a problem for you. Sorry. So I was busy fiddling with sound settings on my end. I apologise immensely.
Okay. Well, you had problems with your sound?
I can't hear Martin at all. So you're kind of my translator for Martin, is what's happening at the moment.
Oh, that's a bit weird. Martin, can you just speak for me?
Yes, sure.
Okay, that's a bit bizarre. Mark, I will keep talking and see whether you can hear anything in a second, but you should be able to hear absolutely everything. This is a bit weird. It just stopped. Did it just stop a few minutes ago, Mark?
No, it's the same problem we had. It's okay. We've been doing so well so far. It's all good.
Okay. You're brilliant. You're just so professional. All right. Consumer Reports has been contacted over the years by lots of people trying to buy EVs, and they have been told, as we have in the past by lots of people, dealers don't really A, know, or B, care about electric vehicles, and there needs to be more education. So Consumer Reports, bless it, sent out these secret shoppers to 85 different dealerships to try and find out what dealerships really do know about EVs. And the results are quite shocking. I'll kind of give you some bullet points. First up, there was big disparities between different brands. So Chevy dealers tended to be the best, and Nissan dealers and Ford dealers. But Toyota and Honda dealers didn't know squat. It's probably the nice way of putting it. Or at least if they did, they weren't encouraging of people coming in and saying, we want to buy an EV. They were going, wouldn't you like this nice SUV? Wouldn't you like this nice hybrid instead? And in one case...
I was just going to say, I can kind of half see it from their point of view, in the sense that they see EVs as scary new technology. And the last thing they want, if they've got a new walk-in customer, is for them to buy a car and then come back in 2 weeks later and go, this car doesn't work for me. I don't want this car. You missold me a car. So instead of fighting that with knowledge and science and explanation, they're taking the easier route, which is, this car over here has never given us any problems. And Shantanu, so I can kind of see why it's happening, but this is part of the problem if you don't have manufacturer-owned dealerships, because they've got no incentive for selling any one particular model over any other.
That's very, yeah. Martin?
Well, in Denmark, we had the same problem in many of the dealerships, and also the dealers doesn't earn as much money on an EV as they do on an ICE car. So that is another issue. And people, of course, ask more questions about the EV, so it's a harder sell. So I understand them in some way. But the BMW only has one dealer for the i3 in Denmark, and I went there a few weeks ago, and they had a very, very educated person there explaining all the details in a very professional way. I was really surprised that BMW has done a big job to educate their dealer. That's amazing.
Well, I've come across some dealers in the UK who don't know much about EVs. You have as well, Mark, haven't you?
Yes. And it's to the point of they don't know which cables go in their cars, which is a bit shocking. But I've also met a lot of people in dealerships who love the EVs, not necessarily the salespeople as well, the drivers who get to drive them around. I think it comes down to the people who have driven these cars seem to really get them and understand why people want them. People who haven't driven them don't necessarily understand them.
That's an interesting thought. Well, I mean, this Consumer Reports survey as well showed that a lot of dealers seem to have, there was this split. Some dealers went, yeah, we can't get enough EVs because they're really, really popular. And other ones just went, no one wants to buy them. The other interesting one was 13 of the 85 actually actively discouraged people from buying an EV.
Wow.
7 of them being in New York. Why? Anyone who's lived or driven through New York knows how noisy and smelly and horrible the state is. Unless you go upstate, of course. But if you go through New York City, it's a horrible place because of the noise and the pollution.
Do we know if the secret shopper was the same person and whether they were male or female?
There were 19 secret shoppers, male and female.
I wonder if there was
Sorry?
I'm just wondering if there was a difference between male and female secret shoppers on the advice they were given. That would be quite interesting.
That would be very interesting. I know that when I go into a dealership, I am treated very differently when I'm on my own versus when I have a guy with me. And when I've got my kids, people treat me very differently as well. I tend to be talked down to when I have children. What's that about? Martin, do you have any experience of how dealers treat women and men differently?
Well, if you go to a car repair shop, they treat women very different from men, absolutely. I've seen it many times. But I've never experienced anything with the kids. That's just the normal way to suppose.
Interesting. All right, let's move on to the next story. The BMW i3 is coming out in the US very soon. The i3 Rex, apparently, though, seems to have some differences between the US version and the European version. Now, we already knew that the i3 Rex in the US wouldn't have the range hold function, so you can't press a button to hold the battery pack's charge and use the petrol engine or the gasoline engine as the range extender and then kind of turn it on later on. But it appears also that the petrol tank on the i3, or the gas tank on the i3 Rex, is smaller in the US than it is in Europe. Now, I am skeptical about this. I've seen it reported from several different sources who've said in Europe we have a 1.9 litre... No, we don't. We have a 9 litre fuel tank, don't we? 9 litres, which equates to 1.98 imperial gallons or 2.37 US gallons. Now, the reports coming out are saying 1.9 US gallons. Now, I just have this feeling in my head, and I'm going to stand by this until someone actually measures it or gives me evidence that says otherwise. I think this is just somebody coming along and going, I've used the wrong conversion. Yes. Because most Europeans, I hate to be rude, but most Europeans I have encountered, most Brits I have encountered, don't know there's a difference between British gallons, and which are the imperial gallons, and the US gallons. People don't know that as a general fact. And so I suspect that's where it's come in. Martin, you used to work in airports, didn't you?
Yeah.
Was this a common confusion?
It was a very common confusion, unfortunately. But I had the same thought when I heard this story first, that it might be a miscalculation. But on the other hand, isn't there something about the size of the fuel with getting one of these stickers in California?
Yeah, there is. There is also about the size of the way that the engine runs and the operation, etc., etc. And obviously, this is a new category. The BevX is a new category under CARB rules, specifically for the i3 Rex. But what I think it could also be is a fuel bladder. Because this is all to do with evaporative emissions. Mm-hmm. And plug-in cars have to be very careful about the evaporative emissions of the fuel. Yeah. You've got this fuel sitting in the fuel tank. If you let that vapor evaporate, it doesn't do any good to the filter, does it? In the filter that captures all the loose hydrocarbons, right? So,
no, which is why the volts and the ampere pressurize the fuel slightly.
Right. Okay. Now, the previous generation of Prius had a fuel bladder in, which contained the fuel, and it effectively was able to contract and expand with the fuel to try and minimize the amount of evaporative hydrocarbons in the tank. I'm wondering if BMW is doing a similar trick in this car for the US market so that it satisfies CARB regulations. And that would account for that slight difference as well. Because the old US Prius had a similarly small fuel tank compared to the European Prius. So, I don't know quite where we go with that. The other thing interesting, though, coming from a BMW salesperson who went to the training, is that the range extender will only kick in when there's 6.5% of SOC left. The range extender will not run when the car is stopped, so it really will just be a range extender. You can't charge the battery back up like you can with the Volt or some of the other plug-in range extender EVs on the market, or plug-in hybrids on the market. The other thing is that when it is down at that point, when the range extender is running, the car will be limited to 70 miles an hour. Several people, we've been accused of, we've had quite a few people unsubscribe from our site because they say we're being mean about the BMW i3, but I'm just reporting what somebody else has said out of the training sessions. But this ties in with what we heard
as well.
Yeah, this ties in with what we've heard. Somebody took a BMW i3 Rex in the UK for a trip, and they went up a hill and it slowed down, didn't it, Mark?
Yeah, so they went on a trip which was at the range, the very extent of the range of the car. Before they got to the end, the Rex kicked in, and then they didn't charge up because it's got the petrol engine. So then they turned around and did the same trip coming back. But they found that when they were on the motorway and there was a slight incline, they couldn't get the car to go above 45 miles an hour. And they wrote quite a scathing report of the car because of that.
Mm-hmm. And it would be interesting to know if this is the case. Martin, have you gone up any big hills in an i3 Rex?
I haven't done the Rex yet. So there is only one Rex in the country, and I haven't been that fortunate to drive it yet. And it is very difficult to find a steep incline here in Denmark.
Well, yes. Same in my home part of Norwich, Norfolk. We're kind of separated by the sea, but it's essentially the same bit of land, isn't it? Split.
Yeah.
Split a long, long time ago. All right, let's move on. Final story. Have you ever lost your mind when you've been driving, Mark?
No, I'm a very calm person.
You are, actually. You are great, because I tend to get quite stressy, don't I?
No, yeah.
You're not. No, not. You're not supposed to say that.
Not at all. No, not at all. You don't ever get stressed.
All right. Are you a stressful person, Martin?
No, I'm not. Very seldom when I drive, actually.
I don't get stressy when I drive. I just get stressy sometimes when I have to deal with children and everything else. But this guy, and I should warn everybody, this might be NSFW. This guy completely loses it on the PCH in California, takes off his clothes in the Tesla Model S in the middle of the freeway, and then gets up on top of his car and does the Tesla dance. He's in the center. He's in the median of. He's in the center of the PCH, one of California's busiest roads, dancing around naked on Earth Day this week in his Tesla Model S. We're not going to go any further because there's Rudy nudie bits coming in a second, so I'm gonna, I'll save that. I feel really sorry for this guy. He was described as either having a mental breakdown or a psychiatric condition or was on drugs. And that's all they've said, and they've taken him to hospital. I hope that he is okay. I hope his family are okay. I hope that he's being looked after. And as we said when we reported it, mental health is not something to joke about, nor is drug abuse. So if those are issues that affect you, please seek help. But it did certainly make the Los Angeles kind of gossip news, didn't it, Mark?
Yeah, and it was a fairly big story because it's exactly what people want. Someone doing something slightly out of the usual, bit of flesh thrown in as well. It was proper journalist fodder, really. And I like you said, it's funny when you first look at it, you go, look, it's funny. And then you kind of start realizing the implications of it. And there's a man there who probably has a family and is either going through a very serious time in his life or has taken something which hasn't agreed with his mind too well at all, and you just kind of feel sorry for him.
Yeah, and I think, when I was recording it today, I think my brain was it was first thing in the morning, and I did have trouble recording this morning for 10 because we covered it on 10 and not laughing about it. But at the same point, you have to remember there's a human behind this. There's somebody who is clearly unwell. Either that or it was a very clever Earth Day stunt. And if it was the latter, hopefully someone will come clean and go, yeah, this is an Earth Day stunt for YouTube or whatever. And in which case we can go, oh, well, that was, no. But the guy was kind of waving his arms around, as I said, like a cross between traffic cop meets calisthenics. So I think he was pretty much, not with it. Non corpus mentis, as I think I said earlier on. Dennis, who very often watches the show, sent a message to me saying, I hope that it was actually his car, because Tesla uses that as a test drive route, which would have been a pretty horrible thing for anybody if they,
Wow.
if they were a Tesla employee and they were out with this guy and he just stopped and stripped naked in the middle of the... Anyway, let's see. All right, we're going to have another ad break. We will be right back. We're staying with Tesla. Tesla has begun deliveries of the Model S in China, and has also been promising Chinese-made cars by 2070 in China, Tesla Model S's. But the interesting thing is, registration for your Model S might be tougher than you think. If you buy a Chinese-made EV, you are exempt from the state-run, or Beijing, it's run by the state, it's a lottery for your license plate, effectively. Now, I'd not heard of this before. Had you, Mark? No,
this was completely new to me as well.
So it issues licenses in Beijing on a lottery system. The inside EVs say you have a chance of winning the license plate lottery are between 1 in 50 and 1 in 100, depending on the numbers of applicants at the current time of selection. And because the Tesla Model S is not made in China, you have to go through this lottery system. If you bought a Chinese-made EV, you would be exempt from it and you just get a license plate. So this is an interesting one. So I'm not sure quite how Tesla's going to get around this. Are you, Mark? Because obviously Tesla likes its customers to order cars in advance and then makes them. But obviously, how do you... I don't know how this works. Maybe someone in China can tell us.
So do they have to pre-build a certain number of cars to a set number of specs?
Well, I don't know.
That'd be very interesting to find out, because they're very excited about going into the Chinese market. So I can't believe that this problem's just cropped up without them having come across it before.
The other thing to bear in mind, though, is that the Tesla Model S is only available as an 85 kilowatt or a P85 kilowatt. You can't get the 60 kilowatt in China anymore.
Ah, okay.
And I don't think it's going to be very long before they can it in the UK and the US as well. I just don't think people are buying 60 kilowatt hours generally. I don't know what's going to happen there. All right, Nissan seriously going to consider, or seriously is considering. Andy Palmer, one of the Nissan executives, described Nissan as having intense internal debate about increasing the capacity of the lithium-ion battery pack in the Nissan Leaf for the next generation car. So currently it's 24 kilowatt hours. It's about 17 or 18 kilowatt hours usable, isn't it, guys?
Yeah, give or take. No one knows exactly.
I mean, I'm getting about 18 kilowatt hour usable, having lost a capacity bar, with 53,000 miles on the clock. That's what I'm getting. But a lot of people apparently are keen for a longer range Leaf. I've talked about it before. I said, if it was the right price, I'd buy it. Mark, you came out with a very good thought of the day this week, in which you essentially said Nissan should only make a longer range Leaf once the price of that 150 mile or 200 mile Leaf is the same as the base as the previous generation car. That's essentially what you were saying, isn't it?
Yeah, so otherwise they will be accused of just raising the price and making another rich man's toy, or they'll be accused of going, oh, well, yes, you sell this EV here, but the one that's really usable by most people is just a rich man's toy. And I think if I was in their position, I'd be working hard to make sure it was released at the original price the original Leaf was released at. So then they can say things like, we've doubled the range at no cost to you, and it becomes a very good marketing thing then as well.
Yeah. Do you think people would buy longer range, and should Nissan do it, Martin?
At some point of time, they should do it, absolutely, but I'm not sure we are there yet, because many of us can easily live with the size battery we have now for a daily commute and the kids run, the school run, and all that. So I doubt that there would be a very big need for a larger battery. As usual, when you think of it before you buy an EV, you think that the battery size should be twice or three times bigger. But then you end up finding out that you can easily live with the size we have now.
Yeah. And Mark, I think that Martin makes a very valid point. When you don't know what you need, you think you need more.
Yes. Oh, yeah, I completely agree. Because and people have never really analysed their driving patterns. I've spoken to people who are convinced they drive 60 miles a day, when then you plot it out on Google Maps and they're only driving 20. People don't have a concept of distance very well, and I think that plays into it a lot.
Do we think that Nissan is going to do it? Because Andy Palmer kind of has given us the best possible hint that this is going to happen without saying we're going to make it happen.
Yes, I'm quite sure they will do it, and somebody should go ahead in this field and make larger batteries. But as I said many times before, they should focus on the possibility of faster charging at home, not doing 3.7, but go to 7 or 11 or whatever. That's the game changer in real life.
Interestingly, though, I would be worried about a longer range car and the Chatterley quick charge. Would either of you have that problem? Because at the moment, Chatterley is 50 kilowatts, although a lot of sites in the UK are about 30, 40 kilowatts. Mark, you said 65 kilowatts is the maximum?
62.5, I believe.
62.5, which seems a bit weird.
Standard. Yeah, and they've said on their site, they've got a statement that says even with larger batteries, we don't see it going above 50, which is interesting again. But you have to keep in mind that with the Leaf, the power is throttled with the Leaf when you hit about 40-50% full in the battery. It's incredibly early on in the battery pack. So I'm wondering if a double in the battery might actually not result. You might end up with a 0 to 80 time of 35 minutes because it won't have to throttle as quickly, is what I'm thinking. Or maybe at least you could dump the 70 miles that you've got would get in the current Leaf into the new Leaf much, much quicker because it can operate at that higher rate for longer.
Yeah. That makes
so
sense.
it's not a direct. I've doubled the range, so it's going to take twice as long to charge.
That's true, actually. You're quite right. And also, it would be better on the battery, wouldn't it? Because you wouldn't be going to the limits all the time.
Yeah.
What do you think? That makes sense. That makes sense. So, how much would you consider acceptable, Martin? I mean, you just said yes, most people don't need it, but what would you consider acceptable? What do you think Nissan should shoot for if it is going to make a longer range pack?
Well, if you could choose, it would be nice to have a 50% increase in range. That would be very nice, very comfortable for many people. I don't
So
think
that would be about 120, 140 miles?
something like that. Yeah. I know 150 miles is sounds very, very nice and could be nice, but again, the price and the weight and everything is complicated.
That's true. Mark?
And it would have to have a 6.6 kilowatt charger as standard. It leads to other issues as well. So a lot of people, their home chargers aren't 32 amps, which you'd want then, because that keeps the charging time at home to 8 hours rather than 16 hours using the ones that have been installed. So yeah, it has a bigger impact, but I think it's a good thing. I think that, and then hinting at it, I think is their way of nudging Tesla to say, we've been paying attention and we're not just going to let you take the affordable market.
Interesting. I think Nissan does need to do it though, because otherwise Tesla and all these other car companies are going to come along and go, look, we can go further than you, and that will kill the car. All right, Volvo V60 plug-in hybrid. I really like this car. I'm just going to lay this down and say I really like this car. And I'm going to be so criticised by people. In a lot of ways, the V60 plug-in hybrid is a far more versatile car than the Chevy Volt. Because it's got 5 seats, it's a wagon, not a hatchback. It can tow. It's got a diesel engine, okay, which is not as environmentally nice as a petrol engine. It's got 30-mile all-electric range, about the same as the Volt on a bad day. And Volvo's just come out with a new variant, guys!
Kind of.
No, it's a new variant. Volvo did a press release and everything. What's the new variant, Mark?
It's a sport version, essentially. I can't remember what they actually called it, but essentially they're saying it's a sport version of the car, except for they haven't changed anything.
It's the R. No, it is the R design, which is obviously a big thing for Volvo. It's kind of standard across Volvo range. You can get the R design variant of most of Volvo's cars, and the R design basically adds big sporty alloy wheels. You know, they emphasize the wheel arches a little bit with a body kit. They put a spoiler on the back. They might have different paint options. Inside, you get racing bucket seats in the front, and you get special black headliner, and you get sporty pedals, and yeah, you're driving a sports car, but it's got the same engine, it's got the same motor, it's got the same electric range, it's got the same fuel economy. It just costs a bit more. Martin, are people going to actually buy that?
I'm not too sure about this, but you know, I'm not the right one to ask with range extenders, because they are so expensive in this country. So I don't have much experience apart from the Volt with range extenders.
Mark, what do you think?
I can see why they're press releasing it. I can see why they're doing it. It's this level. I have a slightly different level for what's news and what isn't when it comes to automotive things than most automotive journalists, because it's not news really. They've just changed the look and feel of it. It's like
yes, but it's a slow news week.
It is a slow news week.
It's been a really slow news week. I can see why people want it. I can see why Volvo's doing it. And my argument is, if it encourages more people behind the wheel of a plug-in vehicle as opposed to a regular petrol or diesel version, I'm happy. Yeah, this is a transitional vehicle as far as I'm concerned. Potentially say As I said, it is approaching Model S money, so most people are going to go for the Model S. But at the same point, if you do need to tow, and the Model S can't, not legally, in the UK certainly, you might find that as an alternative. I mean, I don't know. I spent a week with one and I loved it to bits. I didn't like the fact that its range was so limited. And, all the way through that drive, I was thinking, I would really like an all-electric Volvo wagon. And there's a guy in the Netherlands, I think, Martin, with one. It might be even in... I don't know. It's a guy with a 245, Volvo 245, that's converted it to electric. I can't think of his name.
Okay, I haven't seen that one.
So it's an old school Volvo 245, and I had one of those, and I loved the thing to bits, although it was horrible because it was a gas guzzler. But, I'm looking forward to, getting an electric one day. It's on my list. Talking about car collections, this gentleman is known for being a bit of a prankster. He is Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak, the Woz. He's done some really crazy things over the years, hasn't he, Mark? He phone freaked. He's one of the first phone freakers, I think.
Which is when you make phone calls by tricking exchanges into not thinking that you're making a phone call and things like that. So yeah, he was a proper geek back when.
He still is.
Cool
yeah, he still is. And he has a Tesla Model S. Now he had a really interesting story with the Tesla Model S because he's got obviously quite a lot of cars. He's got a Humvee H1 is one of his cars. He had a Prius for many years and was kind of vocal about the range, the unintended acceleration, and the way that the car would just kind of strangely accelerate. But he also was going to buy a Mercedes. He's going to buy a Tesla Model S, and he was on the list. And then somebody offered him a really good deal on an S550 Mercedes-Benz on the S-Class. So he did that and sort of cancelled the order for the Model S. And then apparently Elon Musk rang him up and went, "You're not a very nice Silicon Valley man, are you? If you went ahead and bought the Mercedes instead of the Model S." Ended up anyway, I don't know if Woz kept hold of the Mercedes-Benz, but last October he bought a Model S. And since then, he's been going round live, or not live tweeting, he's been foursquaring. Every time he goes to a supercharger, he foursquares. I'd be really interested to know if anybody's actually bumped into Woz at a supercharger, because he seems to make quite a lot of long-distance trips, and he pushes his Model S right to the limits. And I seem to think he's got a 60 kilowatt-hour version instead of the 85 kilowatt-hour version. I'm not so sure. But
it's really interesting that someone with as much money as he's got doesn't just buy the top of everything. That's quite interesting.
I think it's a 60 kilowatt-hour. Maybe someone can confirm. I just seem to recall somewhere someone said he's got a 60 kilowatt-hour instead of a 85. But anyway, he does make a lot of trips in it, and it's his main car now. He got the internet into a bit of a tiz yesterday evening because he posted this photograph, and he said next to it, me and my next car, or something like that. I can't remember exactly what his words were, but lots of people kind of got quite excited. It was he tweeted our new Tesla. And lots of people were kind of, "Oh wow, you've got a Tesla Model X," because that's a Tesla Model X, obviously. And of course, it was just him joking around. He was at the Hawthorne Design Studio in LA.
Being intentionally misleading.
I don't think he was doing it intentionally. I mean, maybe he's got a Tesla Model X on order. I wouldn't put it past him. Maybe he's finally decided to put that Hummer out to pasture. He has previously said that the Hummer is the last car he'll get rid of. So I don't know. And he's driven a hydrogen Hummer before as well. Maybe he was saying, "Yeah, I've ordered one." But he's at the Tesla Hawthorne. He was at the Tesla Hawthorne Supercharger last night, which is obviously next to the design studio, which is, by the way, behind the back of SpaceX. And while we're on the subject of SpaceX, I think we should just congratulate Elon Musk and the SpaceX team on their work this past week, docking with the ISS with Dragon. That was phenomenal. Did either of you see it?
I didn't watch it live, but I've seen lots of clips from it and knew it was going on. It was, especially because they successfully tested the landing gear and the vertical landing as well, which is amazing. I mean, revolutionary in terms of rockets.
Yeah. And I watched the launch and I watched the grappling and the docking with the ISS. It's fantastic. And, I sat there and I talked to my wife and I said, wow, we are at a point in history where generations after us will look back and go, "Wow, I wonder what it was like when." It's a bit like, I wonder what it's like when the rocket, the rocket was making its first trip and the steam train was in its infancy. I wonder what it was like seeing the first electric car. I wonder what it was like seeing the first petrol car. I wonder what it was like doing this. Wonder what it was like doing that. And there have been these big names that have gone through history. Somebody said, "Oh, I met Edison. My grandfather met Edison," and you go, "Wow!" And at some point in the history, in the future, someone's going to turn around and say, "Yeah, we met Elon Musk," and people are going to go, "Wow, what was he like?" Isn't that kind of an incredible feeling? That we're covering an industry and that somebody, and I don't want to be fangirly about this, but someone so influential is alive and in our sphere, and we are covering them. I feel completely privileged to cover everything that's going on at the moment in the EV world, and that includes Elon Musk. It's just brilliant. Martin?
Yes, I agree with you. Although I'm not following the SpaceX project very much into details, but he is an amazing guy, and he still continues to amaze me. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And by the way, the whole Tesla Model X thing with the WOS, we knew it was fake because A, the Model X isn't due to be produced until later this year, and B, the model that WOS was standing next to has cameras instead of rear view mirrors. But it's still got a lot of people excited. He got so many people tweeting him back going, "Cool car, man, congratulations. When are you bringing it over? Can I see it? Blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
blah." So, if you want a product endorsed, give it to WOS, apparently. There we go. That really is it for today's show. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Martin, for joining us. When can people find out more about you and what you're up to?
On my website, evtest.dk is my local website, and also follow me on Facebook, of course.
Fantastic. And there's links, of course, to all of that in the show notes. Thanks to everyone watching today. I hope there's been no problems in the show. I don't think there have been any. I know Mark had some problems. We sold that one, by the way, Mark. I just turned down your auxiliary bus. I can hear everybody perfectly, but obviously you said the sound's now improved. I just turned down the send. We need a sound engineer. You want to come and work for me and be a sound engineer? I can't offer you any money. Can't offer you board and lodgings. I don't think I can offer you anything. But if you want to come and work, because that would be cool. That really is it, folks. Thanks for joining us. And as always, don't forget to plug in. Take care. See you. Bye.
Bye.